Okay, all right. I have instructions to begin. Okay, so I'm very excited to welcome you all to this session exploring examples of legal professionals tackling climate change. I'm Gabby Christian Hare, the CEO of the Australian Pro Bono Centre based in Sydney, and I'm absolutely delighted to be moderating this discussion today. We have a fantastic lineup of speakers, and where we're drastically lacking in gender diversity, we'll certainly make up for in diversity of experience in climate work across multiple jurisdictions. Before we go any further, it would be terrific if as many of you listening as possible could write into the chat right now what kind of organisation you're working at. Are you from a law firm? Are you in-house counsel? Are you representing a civil society organisation, not-for-profit, or another kind of organisation? It would be very helpful for us all on the panel just to gauge who's listening. So I'll just leave a few seconds for you all to type into the chat now, if that's fine. Great, thank you. Great to see the answers coming in. Law firm, not-for-profit, NGO, another NGO, law firm, NGO. Thank you, Jess. Terrific. Okay, so panelists, it looks like we've got a really nice combination of law firm and NGO representatives in particular. Okay, thank you very much, everybody. So by way of introduction to this topic, I think many of us will agree that as a global community, we are far from acting in a manner that reflects the threat that we're all facing to our natural home, our livelihoods, our health, and our global economy. Lawyers clearly have the skills, the expertise, and the resources to help tackle this crisis. But with the notable exceptions that we'll hear about today, to date, pro bono legal work on the climate has unfortunately been rather conspicuous by its absence relative to other pro bono focus areas. And I think we'll all agree that it is time to change this. So today, our speakers, who have each been at the forefront of climate work, are going to share their experiences so that we can all be guided and inspired and determine how we can all make a difference. In the interest of time, I'm going to give reasonably short introductions to our 5 panelists first, but I would encourage you to look at each of their profiles on the conference website after the session. During the session today, please do put questions in the chat, and we'll select as many in the second half of the session. I'd like to introduce Claire Dons. Claire leads DLA Piper's pro bono program in Africa, Asia Pacific, Europe, the Middle East, and the UK. Claire also works with New Perimeter, DLA Piper's international pro bono initiative and non-profit affiliate. Claire has overseen a wide range of climate-related matters, some of which are showcased in a guide released by us at the Australian Pro Bono Centre, which we'll mention at the end of the session. Next, I'd like to introduce Ellie Mulholland. Ellie is the London-based director of the non-profit Commonwealth Climate Law Initiative and a senior associate in the climate risk governance team of the law firm Ellison. Ellie also sits on the steering committee of the groundbreaking Chancery Lane project, a pro bono collaboration among members of the legal profession to acquire contracts and laws to tackle climate change. We haven't yet got Kelly join us, so but I would very Kelly is Senior Risk and Compliance Manager of the Vodafone business. Kelly is currently based in London, and her scope is global with a particular focus on Europe, Asia, and the Middle East markets. Kelly has been involved as an in-house lawyer in the Chancery Lane project, along with Ellie, and has been involved in other sustainability initiatives, and we're looking forward to hearing from her in-house perspective today. So fingers crossed that we'll have Kelly join us very soon. And Marion is a scientist at Hogan Lovells in London and has worked for over 20 years with lawyers on scientific matters relevant to their legal practices and works on a range of climate-related work at different levels. At a legal conference, I must say it is wonderful to have a scientist speaking. So thank you so much for joining us today, Maria. And then last but not least, Özlem Altıparmak is joining us today. Özlem is based in Turkey. She is the founder of the Altıparmak Law Office, and working as a lawyer specializing in human rights. Özlem has been instrumental in the development of the Rights and Research Association in Turkey, of which she's vice president. And its primary goal is to initiate a preventive legal system for the climate crisis in Turkey, including by building a network of legal professionals involved in this important work. So I'm now going to ask each of the panelists to speak about their roles and to let us all know about the climate work that they've been involved in. So Claire, may I start with you? Could you let us know about your role at DLA Piper and the wide range of climate-related work that DLA has been involved in?
Sure, absolutely. Thank you very much, Gabby, and wonderful to be here with everybody. So as Gabby mentioned, I lead the pro bono practice across the international firm of DLA Piper. I'm also the point person for our climate change work. In terms of my sort of personal driver for this and why climate speaks to me, I'm originally Australian, you might hear from the accent, and I think everybody will be aware that Australia has had devastating bushfires earlier this year, but before that we've had droughts, bushfires not quite to the same level, but it's been an ongoing difficulty for Australia. My family was evacuated earlier this year, and we continue to see the consequences in Australia. We also do a lot of pro bono work in Africa in our pro bono practice, and personally I've spent a lot of time in Zambia. Last time I visited Zambia, there was a huge drought, which was causing a huge loss of livelihood and income for many of the farmers, but was also causing huge power outages because they rely on hydroelectricity. Zambia is the least developed country. It doesn't have the infrastructure to deal with this, so you really see firsthand what the impacts of climate change are and how difficult it is to deal with it, particularly in LDCs. In terms of the work that we do at DLA Piper in this space, I'd categorise our work into three main categories, and I'll talk about them in terms of different groups of clients. So those three categories are governments, NGOs, and then UN agencies. In terms of our work with governments, we've long been working with post-conflict and least developed countries. Climate change and environmental degradation and natural disasters have a disproportionate impact on fragile and vulnerable communities. So we thought it was really important to help them to really boost their knowledge and try and help them to tackle this. They're by a lack of available resources, and so it's particularly difficult for governments in these countries to have their voices heard and really participate and get the knowledge that they need. Our work focuses with governments on three areas. The first is training. So we have done a lot of work around negotiations and helping countries to prepare for negotiations, so climate change, but also the creation of frameworks that impact upon often trade and the impact that that trade has on the climate. Sorts of work we've done in that space include things like legal research, drafting, speech writing, policy briefings, and general capacity building. We've also done environmental law training for a large range of government officials. Second area that we work with governments in is representation. So I just mentioned we've prepared a lot of countries for UNFCCC negotiations. That's led to us actually following the negotiations in a pro bono capacity, and in some instances acting as legal representatives for a delegation. And we've done that with a small island government, and for many years now through our non-profit affiliate New Perimeter, we have been representing the government of Georgia at the UNFCCC negotiations. Third area of our work for governments is legal advice. So things like looking at international conventions and advising, conducting legal reviews of legislation, both climate change acts, but also other legislation that impacts upon the climate, often on a sector-wide basis, and to help to identify gaps. both with international practice, but also where things are just not covered, and to help strengthen protection. We've particularly done that in African countries to date. And then the third example that I'll give in this space is the work that we've been doing more recently in Ethiopia. We've been working with the EFCCC, which is the Environment, Forestry and Climate Change Commission, to help to establish the first environmental tribunal in Ethiopia. That tribunal is designed to improve access to justice and enhance the enforcement of international and domestic environmental laws and policies and principles. So we've been working closely with the Commission to look at models around the world, to help with the rules and the regulations, and then we'll have a continuing relationship as that develops. That brings me to the second category of work that we're doing in this space, which is working with NGOs. We've provided advice to NGOs on a range of issues. There's obviously general corporate advice, so supporting non-profits that are working in the environmental or sustainability space with their legal needs, things like employment, IPT advice, general corporate work. We also try to work with those organisations in relation to their programmatic work. So if there is legal research that they need on a particular issue, for example, a superpower grid, or if they're looking to work out what international practices are, what the EU has mandated in a certain space, we really help them with those sorts of general legal questions that I think we all deal with in our pro bono practices on a regular basis. We've also done a judicial review of an administrative decision that had a negative impact on the environment and worked with an NGO to work out whether or not the process was actually followed. Turns out it wasn't, so that was a successful challenge to a government decision. The second area that we work with in relation to NGOs is supporting access to climate finance. What I mean by that is financing green solutions and helping to try and make more finance available for climate-friendly solutions. The examples of the work that we've done in this space are working with non-profits in particular who are developing innovative models to really drive investment on climate change and sustainable development. So we've been working on a number of financial instruments that seek to provide alternative models of finance, including bonds to support a sustainable agriculture, and also funds that will promote and help establish conservation areas. So that brings me to our final category of clients, the UN. We have long worked with the UN at DLA, and we're really pleased to be able to extend our work into the climate space. The sorts of work that we've done with UN clients is, again, quite varied, looking at things like general research in relation to disaster reduction and frameworks around the world, running workshops on climate change and the law for lawyers and government officials, and also working on sustainable housing projects. We worked on a big project maybe about 18 months ago that was looking to build, or has built now, I think, over 250,000 sustainable and affordable homes across Africa and the Caribbean. Again, that was a great opportunity for our lawyers because it's the renewable aspect, it's job creation, and it's really interesting work across a whole range of different jurisdictions. The final area that we are really developing at the moment is at DLA, we have a global focus area of refugees and displaced people. We're thinking really hard about how we can bring climate into that work. There's increasing evidence that climate change will be a driving factor in migration, both within states and across states. Not just rising sea levels, so that's part of it. It's also things like extreme weather, scarcity of natural resources, which leads to increased conflict, lack of arable land, lack of water. The current refugee convention doesn't recognise climate refugees, and there doesn't seem to be any international appetite to actually amend it. So we're looking at ways in which we can contribute to help develop alternative solutions for the countries that are impacted. And in terms of where we actually source these matters, it was existing relationships. So we had existing relationships with quite a few of the UN clients and with the post-conflict and least developed countries. We also tried to work out strategically what we wanted to work on, so particularly in the climate finance area, and made direct approaches to NGOs that we thought were doing really interesting work in that space. And obviously clearinghouses, we always make sure we monitor the clearinghouse lists and put our hands up for work that fits our skills.
Thanks very much, Claire. Fantastic. Just the wide variety of work that DLA Piper is involved in respect of the climate is really quite extraordinary. And what you've really highlighted for us is just the range of different focus areas, from legal research to policy writing, general capacity building, and for such a wide variety of clients as well. And thank you for mentioning your work for refugees and asylum seekers too, because I think it can be actually missed when we all think about climate work, not necessarily focusing on that area. So thank you very much, Claire. I'm now going to turn to Ellie. Ellie, you've been so devoted to climate-related work across a range of different initiatives. Could you now tell us about this work, including your work, of course, for the Chancery Lane project and your work at Minter Ellison as well?
Sure. Thanks, Gabby. Good morning, everyone. And thank you to PILnet for the opportunity to speak to you today about something that I think is really important, how we as legal professionals can tackle the climate crisis. So I'll start with a little bit on my journey to becoming a lawyer that's specialising in climate, because there's fewer of us than there should be. And then I'm going to talk to you about the Chancery Lane project and my role as the steer coordinator for that, and how my law firm Minter Ellison was involved. So my journey to being a climate lawyer, and when I say that, I don't mean an environmental lawyer. I've never studied environmental law. I don't know what it is. It's like compliance and permitting. But I look at climate through an economic and financial lens. So for me, it's risk and liability and opportunity and value. But there are many other lenses through which to look at it, and particularly climate justice. And so that's equally important. It's just not the focus that I have. So there's others doing some absolutely wonderful work there that is so important, and we're not going to solve this unless we look at it through that lens. Is really key. So I remember this. You might be able to hear my accent too. Like Claire, I am an Australian. I'm based here in London. But I remember this really bad drought back in 1998, and I was carrying grey buckets of water out from the shower to water the plants. So it's always mattered the way in which, a safe space for humanity on this planet. But it wasn't until I went to law school that I realised that it matters for the law as well. So what did I do? Well, I went to work. And I worked in energy and resources. So I did a bit of renewable energy and carbon markets work, but I also just did a lot of work in the fossil fuel economy. And so after years of that, I came across to the UK to do a master's. And when I finished that, I took up a role as director of the non-profit Commonwealth Climate and Law Initiative. And we look at the intersection of climate and biodiversity issues and existing corporate and securities laws. So we do legal research, stakeholder engagement in that. And then also I started to work part-time as well for the climate risk governance team at Minter Ellison. So it now is a team within a commercial law firm. So that job that exists now for me that didn't my first time having a go as a commercial lawyer. But that takes me to the Chancery Lane project, which I'm really excited to talk to you about. Now, TCLP, as we call it, it was born during London Climate Action Week in 2019, and it organised a conference for general councils, how they can help lead the net zero transition. And one of the amazing attendees we had was a general counsel here in the UK, Matt Gingell. And he came to these events at London Climate Action Week and was on the train on the way back and really heard the call from a climate scientist at one of the events. We need a new Manhattan project, but not to build a nuclear bomb. We've got those already. We need a Manhattan project where we get the best and brightest minds together to tackle this issue of the climate crisis. And so Matt did something about it, and he reached out to a group of us, and we became the steering committee for the Chancery Lane project, which, as Gabby mentioned, is a collaborative project where we aim to rewire contracts and laws to tackle climate change. And I'm particularly excited around the contracts, because thinking about the power of the pen that we have as lawyers, we write the contracts that set the economic relationships of society and business and commerce. And so these economic relationships can either lock us into dangerous climate change, or they can bring forward climate solutions. So we advise and we have influence. And even here, even in jurisdictions where we have ambitious targets written in law, like in the UK and in Europe with the European climate law, net zero emissions by 2050, contracts are so important because they bring forward the impact curve of those laws. And then we can even do that. So contracts are multinational. They're not limited to one jurisdiction, and they can even replicate the effects of laws like carbon pricing, or align economic interests with climate action, which will embolden policymakers even more. So it's really crucial that we as commercial lawyers align our contracting for our clients with these climate solutions. As our founder says, change the precedent and you can change the world. So we're a politically and professionally neutral organisation. We have hackathons. Our first event was in November last year, and we got 120 lawyers together in a room around tables with post-it notes and pieces of A3 paper, and using design thinking to hack out what are the solutions, what would be ambitious drafting today that we can make it the norm very, very soon, because we know that we need to act rapidly. So from that, we came out with our publications, which are the Climate Contract Playbook and the Green Papers of Model Laws. So we've got drafting like clauses for termination for a greener supplier, or climate purposed NDAs, climate risk sharing clauses instead of your traditional force majeure. So we've now been doing online hacking. We haven't been able to sit in a room and create that magic, but we've been recreating it online. And so we've now got 3 editions of the Climate Contract Playbook, 2 of a glossary of climate terms, and 1 of model laws. We've had over 20,000 downloads in over 70 countries, over 115 organisations, big law firms like Slaughter & May, Hogan Lovells, Clyde & Co, some really key corporates. And so this is where Kelly is going to speak to us in a moment. Vodafone, Airbnb, really large multinationals. We've got their in-house counsel saying this is important, this matters, and I'm going to integrate this in my business to help my business achieve its emissions targets and to be leaders. So we've got hundreds of lawyers in our community volunteering time, some a few hours, some are at hundreds already. We started in the UK with a big hack back in started in the UK, but with the big hack in November this year. Next month, we will truly go global. So we've got 24 hours of virtual hacking. We'll start in London, Europe. We'll then be handing the baton over to New York and the US, and then through to Asia Pac before we pick it back up at midday on the second day here in Europe. So there's lots of opportunities to get involved in that. And just to speak for a moment with my Minter Ellison law firm hat on. So as a law firm, they have a lot of enthusiasm to get involved with the Chancery Lane project. Buy-in was so strong. It is non-contentious. It is professionally planet, climate, client aligned. So we have the CEO of the law firm, the CEO and managing partner. They had absolute support right from the start. We take it to our clients. We take the clauses. We give a lot of pro bono time, but we also get to use it to support our client relationships as well. We're integrating it into our precedents and facilitating a table at the hack. Please do get involved. You'll hear from Kelly, hopefully, if I haven't inspired you enough, and that's what I was really trying to do, to get you to act, Kelly will do so. So will see that you do not need to be an environmental lawyer to get involved in the Chancery Lane project. People come saying, I want to do something about the climate crisis, but I don't know where to start, and I'm not an environmental lawyer. We don't need you to be. We need tax lawyers. We need corporate lawyers. We need lawyers who will think around what the climate crisis needs for your unique expertise situation. We all have an authentic role to play. So I'll pop in the chat box in a moment the Chancery Lane Project website. You can sign up, join our Slack channel, get involved in the big hack, and champion the clauses within your value network as well. I'll hand back to Gabby now. Thank you.
Gabby, I don't think we have your audio yet.
Oh, I'm so sorry. I was on mute. Apologies. I was just saying congratulations to Ellie on the success of the Chancery Lane project, and fantastic to hear that it's going global. And I'm now going to hand over to Kelly, who's going to talk to us about her role at Vodafone and her own involvement in the Chancery Lane project.
Gabby, thank you. And Ellie, thank you for teeing me up to set that positive challenge for our audience today. So good morning, and thank you ever so much for having me here today. So my name's Kelly Fairmont. I work for Vodafone Business, and I'm an in-house lawyer. And I can see on the poll there in the chat that we have a number of law firms, NGOs, and only a handful of in-house lawyers. So I'm also going to touch as we go through as to how you can help your in-house lawyers, because I really do think what's really important for this Creating the Future is that it's a joint effort, and that as future-ready lawyers, we are innovating together. So I'll share a bit about my personal journey, and as Ellie gave the spoiler there, I'm not an environmental lawyer, but I think the reason for me to be here really is to encourage people that you don't need to be infallible and the perfect environmental lawyer to take action here, and actually we need everybody to be doing something. And you may not be an environmental lawyer, but you may be a commercial lawyer, a data lawyer, etc., different professional, and you all have something to bring. So I'll share a little bit about what I'm up to and how I'm working with the Chancery Lane project, Hogan Lovells, Slaughter and May, and Eversheds on this effort, because I think that will probably speak to the audience we have online, given that we've got quite a heavy concentration from a law firm perspective. So by way of introduction, so I appreciate and acknowledge that I'm incredibly fortunate to work for Vodafone. So it is a purpose-led organisation, and that means I've really benefited personally, personal fulfillment-wise, to be able to support planet, inclusivity for all, digital inclusion, things that are important to me as well as part of our company strategy. So I acknowledge that I'm in a privileged position, that the company effort and my personal interest, there's that real immediate win-win when I am contributing to a cause. As to some of the things I've been involved in the past, so I helped with our He for She campaign. I've been part of the British Chamber of Commerce Diversity Committee representing Vodafone there. A bit more of my day job as a commercial lawyer, I did our DreamLab contract originally when we were in the Australia market. So that went from a really exciting idea of a partnership to an app that you can now download on your phone. And in recent pandemic times, that has been extended across a number of markets. So please do check that out. But most recently, and what I'd really like to focus on today, is my personal journey to focus my purpose of efforts in sustainability and why. And I'll take a big step back to say I'm a really passionate scuba diver. So that's something I really enjoy, and there is nothing more calming for a lawyer in a high stress environment than to be under the water where you literally cannot receive a call. It is incredible. It's pristine waters, beautiful, very calming, and almost, I guess, yoga-like for me. So I've always considered sustainability and the climate crisis from very much a personal lens. So what can I as an individual do? And it's only in more recent times that I've put my professional lawyer cap on to figure out what can I do as a lawyer and as a lawyer who's working in-house. So this came from a session in November last year. So one of my really inspirational exec committee members, so Rosemary Martin, who's our general counsel, she opened one of our annual events talking about planet, and that for me resonated for two reasons. One, she was opening a week-long event on planet, which is one of our 3 purpose pillars. So we have digital inclusion for all, digital society, inclusivity for all, and planet. So even the fact that that session, that week-long risk and compliance session, opened with Rosemary and with Rosie talking about planet, resonated, and also what she said about planet. And she said that we were soon to announce what Vodafone were going to be committing above the line to planet. So you can all see that it's in the public domain. So that to me is, I guess, partly what attracted me to put my professional cap on, and that is Rosemary is an incredibly inspirational general counsel. She's personally pledged time to the Chancery Lane project, and she was just opening our weekly forum, which is an annual forum. But for me, I took away this tacit challenge of what do I do? So we as a company have this purpose, it's in keeping with my personal values, so that's this really nice overlap. But how am I using my professional skills to contribute to this movement? And so that really just stuck with me, and I wasn't quite sure the answer. And I think a lot of us can get stuck there. So you can be incredibly knowledgeable and experienced, and perhaps you are an environmental lawyer, so perhaps you are an environmental lawyer, or perhaps you completely have your head in the sand that there's an issue, but there's this huge group of us in the middle who want to do something but aren't quite sure what to do. And that's where I was sitting. So I gave this a lot of thought, and by pure luck on LinkedIn, I came across the Chancery Lane project and reached out to Matt, who's Ellie's colleague, who she mentioned a moment ago. And that was in June this year. So if you just to put that into context, for a recording perspective, we're now only in October, so this is really recent. But my personal hope is that when we're talking about the future, that's smarter, greener, and more human. And so for that, we really, I think, whether it's within firms, NGOs, or corporations, we need to activate our colleagues, our employees, because they're the oxygen of our organizations, they're our culture. And so I created a structure to make it easier for our lawyers to get involved. And that is as simple as 3 events. So we've called it a sustainability series. I'm incredibly lucky to have support from Rosemary and also Kerry Phillip, who's our legal director within Vodafone Business, to roll this out to our team. And we're going to start small with a mini version of the events, and then create a blueprint to roll it out more widely. And that is absolutely stealing from the structure that the Chancery Lane project is doing there as well. So let's start small, let's create a structure and a blueprint, and then let's figure out how to roll it out in a bigger way. So on those 3 events, what we're doing is, the first one we had in September, we had our panel firms come to speak to us and brief us so that we were informed. So dear lawyers, this is what you need to know. And that gets rid of the first kind of professional hurdle of, well, I'm not an environmental lawyer. You don't need to be. This is information you need to know to get started. So dear law firms listening in, please offer this to your clients. I'm sure that they'll receive it as gratefully as we have. The second event was a panel event, and that was to inspire, because and to introduce the Chancery Lane project. So as Ellie touched on, there are a number of precedent clauses, and the real power in those clauses, now that they're there and it's not a blank sheet, is to implement them. And that's what my focus really is, working with the Chancery Lane project and what an implementation model looks like. But of course, to implement requires effort. And so we really wanted to activate and inspire our teams to want to engage with the material, to want to put this into our contracts. And with that team, we really covered the whole end-to-end customer journey. And so we were incredibly lucky. We had a partner, Jeff from Slaughter and May. We had Matt, Ellie's colleague from the Chancery Lane project, and Dorothy, who's our head of sustainable business for Vodafone. And we facilitated a discussion where we shared their stories and why they got involved. So that was just last week. And then in November, we're doing an internal mini hack. So for our lawyers within Vodafone, and supported by the Chancery Lane project, and or supported through the collaboration with the Chancery Lane project and our panel firms who have also dedicated. And the whole purpose of our mini hack is taking a subset of those Chancery Lane clauses, the ones that really are relevant to us, and using those, and using this agile approach, so the hackathon approach and ideation, lots of post-its, albeit now digital post-its and digital whiteboards, to figure out what we can do and how. And we're going to end that session with attendees making a personal pledge as to what they do next. So as an attendee, you might own our NDA template, and then you might make the pledge that you're going to go and add clause X, Y, and Z into that template. You might have a really great relationship with our product development team, and so perhaps you're going to go in and see how you can embed that into our process. So the main, I think, takeaway really for me as part of this piece is, as to why I'm here, I realized that as an individual who really cared deeply about this, I wasn't yet activating my own professional skills And perhaps that was partly through fear of not being as knowledgeable as many of my esteemed panelists here today on the topic of environmental or climate crisis. But you don't need to be to start. And so my encouragement really is to get started. So do the inform, get inspired, but then don't spend too long on steps 1 and 2. Make sure you start the action. And as Ali's mentioned, we really encourage you to join the Chancellery Project Hack, which is in the first week in November, because that gives you that same structure that I've created for our internal lawyers. So I've given just an overview of that sustainability series, and I guess the final piece and my challenge to everyone, and something I'm trying to hold myself to, is consider what positive ripple effect you can have. So for me, having the conversation with Matt had a positive ripple effect on me because I was then aware of the Chancellery Project and then having this conversation, as did Rosemary when she started that leadership session. So there is a number of positive ripple effects we can all have, and the more we're talking about it, the more we're asking the right questions, drafting the right clauses, it's really powerful. And for me, I hope that even if just being here today has a positive ripple effect, that one attendee who's sitting in a law firm or perhaps is in-house wonders if it's similar, then that's absolutely worth the investment of time. And I'm so privileged to be in a panel with such esteemed specialists as well. So thank you ever so much. Gabby, I'm going to pass back to you.
Thank you so much, Kelly. That was highly inspirational, and thank you for sharing your personal and professional journey with the involvement in climate-related work. And it sounds like you have a very supportive environment at Vodafone for this kind of work as well. And thank you so much for illustrating the variety of different activities that in-house teams can become involved in. Fantastic, thank you. Well, I'm now going to hand over to Marion. Marion, it would be fantastic if you could tell us about your climate-related work at Hogan Lovells and how you bring your scientific skills to bear in this work as well. Thank you.
Thanks, Gabby. Lovely to meet everybody, and it's a real privilege to be able to share this stage with my panelists, who are obviously incredibly dedicated to the work they do. So thank you for that. As Gabby pointed out, I'm not a pro bono lawyer, nor am I a lawyer. So I'm a senior scientist at Hogan Lovells, and not many law firms have scientists, so it might be worth just saying a little bit about how my role works. Essentially, I engage to give a scientific opinion on any matter that has a significant scientific content. So this is a hugely varied feast that can be looking at immune responses to vaccines, or the global warming potential of specific greenhouse gases. And I think somebody mentioned the Manhattan Project. One piece of pro bono work I did was looking at the different types of radiation from nuclear bombs during the testing back in the 50s. So it is a very variable role, and it can involve anything from explaining terminology to very clever lawyers who didn't do science, to analysing in-house data, or reviewing the scientific literature on a causation point. Climate change was a personal interest of mine for a very long time. I've been at Hogan Lovells for a very long time. And when I had been there 10 years, we had a party, this was in 2006, for clients to sort of celebrate our 10-year anniversary. We had a climate change party where we invited clients, and we had some speakers from the Oxford Environmental Change Institute. And there was a lot of interest, but not much action at that point. We were doing some work investigating some greenwashing claims at that point, but not a lot of commercial work. But over the last 3 to 4 years, there's been a significant change, and there's a lot of interest in all kinds of sustainability behavior and the science underlying it. And my work at the moment involves looking at the risks of climate change. So this can be straightforward physical risks, reputational risks, liability risks in relation to climate liability. So from the scientific perspective, this involves attribution science. So attributing events that occur to the changes in greenhouse gas in the atmosphere, as well as the potential attribution of specific loss to contributions to those overall emissions. I have a role of sort of being annoying in terms of breaking down the statements or the assertions that people make in relation to their sustainability efforts. So if you are talking about having 100% renewable energy, what does that actually mean? Does that mean that you are purchasing certificates so that you can claim to have 100% renewable energy, or have you created additionality? Have you entered into, and this is where I stray into the lawyer's territory, PPAs to open up a new wind farm or a solar facility? So it's sort of unpicking things to look at the underlying data that is supporting those statements. And I now happily have a role in relation to the firm's own sustainability efforts as well. But I think I'll leave it there, Gabby. Thanks.
Okay. Thank you very much, Marianne. I think Hogan Lovells is extremely lucky to have you, both in respect of its advice to commercial clients and pro bono clients as well. Thank you very much. Now I'm going to turn to Özlem. Özlem, you've been involved in some fantastic work on the climate crisis in Turkey, including your work on the new legal network. So it would be fantastic if you could let us know about it. Thank you.
Hi everyone, and this hi comes from Izmir, the Aegean Sea coast of Turkey. The weather is warm here. We are lucky, and I want to thank you for the invitation as a speaker. I'm very inspired with the presentation of my colleagues. It was really interesting to hear all these. I am a lawyer in Izmir. I attended pro bono forums before as a participant. It was very useful because I have been, working on human rights issues for quite a long time in Turkey, and access to justice was always an important component of our work. We supported the legal clinics, and we worked with the Minister of Justice to develop the human rights and human rights implementation in Turkey. And I'm also very happy to see lots of many participants online here. I think we are nearly 50 participants we have. What I will try to explain you today is the volunteer work that we do in Turkey as lawyers, some of the challenges we face in our work, and the project we will be implementing to overcome these challenges. We recently established the Rights and Research Association, as Gabby mentioned, and I'm now representing my colleagues in this association. As an association, one of our target area is to initiate a preventative legal system in Turkey for the climate crisis. Our activities include the monitoring of environmental cases, reporting, and also building a network of legal professionals, environmental legal network, strategic legal litigation, and also legal counseling for the NGOs, and also capacity building training activities for the lawyers. And also we want to create a model for intern lawyers. So why do we want to do this as a project? Because we want to change the legal approach to environmental issues by initiating a preventative legal system in Turkey. I can say that the approach of the administrative bodies in Turkey is restitutionary, not preventative. And it gives priority to investment and development. So it's not willing to implement the precautionary principle when it comes to the cases. The administrative body gives permission for a project, for example, to a mining project, give the license. And if the damage or risks happen, then restitution or compensation is implemented. But when you cut a tree or you pollute the water, the restitution is not the solution in the climate issues, as we all know. So how do we open a case on environmental issues? You have to have a direct interest in that specific case. Your benefit has to be affected directly from that mining activity or, this wind plant. The actio popularis is not implemented in Turkish law. You open an administrative case in Turkey to state or administrative body to cancel or stop the project because it gives the permission, the state gives the permission, and you want to stop it. So it creates some challenges for our work in Turkey. So you don't go to court against the company as a civil case because it's not efficient. According to Turkish law, the compensation cannot be a tool for enrichment. I don't know, in US maybe the compensation are big amounts of money, but in Turkey it's very symbolic. And going to a court against a company is not efficient, and so opening a civil case is not deterrent. So you can't get a result or stop the activity. In our case, a defendant is always the state and intervening party is the company. So what are the effects of this system on our volunteer work, on volunteer lawyers, on us? Volunteer lawyers are a bit different in Turkey. It's not like big firms. It's individual lawyers who have awareness or who feel social responsibility on the subject. There are also repeating violations, which causes repeating cases. There are some small changes in for example, the project, and the administrative body gives new permission, and the lawyers have to go to court for this new permission, and they have to open a new case. So it creates a heavy workload and heavy burden on lawyers, and it sometimes creates a burnout situation. And you can come to a point, I put so much effort, it is the second case or the third case that I have been dealing with, but what did I achieve as a result? So it creates an environment like this, and you feel I don't know, these feelings as a lawyer. And the administrative defendant's position is also a bit different, and it defends the investor, not the public interest. So the intervening party is the company because of the permission, and it accepts the public interest as in favor of the investment, not in favor of the nature. I can say. So lawyers, I mean us, and all these legal initiatives can be seen as obstacles for the state and the investor, and it affects our work. As a result, I can say that being a volunteer lawyer is not really very attractive and in Turkey, and you experience a kind of hostile environment while dealing with these type of cases. I think due to time limit, I'm going to stop here, the most exciting part of the conversation, and I can mention about the challenges, how to overcome these challenges as a lawyer. I will give the floor to Gabi now.
Thank you so much, Özlem. That's such an interesting discussion. And I mean, as you say, I think what you're doing in Turkey with setting up this legal network full of individual lawyers who are really giving their own time to this work is all the more impressive, given that you're all doing it without the infrastructure of a large law firm or a big corporation behind you. So thank you so much, Özlem. Some of you have mentioned in your chat that there has been to date a real perception by much of the legal profession, I think, that that climate-related work is only for environmental lawyers. And of course, you've dispelled that myth already. I would now like to ask some of you to comment on the wide range of practice areas and parts of the profession that are represented in your respective climate-related pro bono work, and the possibilities for a broader spectrum of lawyers to be involved. While I'm asking a few of the panelists to comment on this, I just wanted to remind all of you listening in today that we really want to hear your questions. So please do pop questions into the chat. And after I've posed this particular question to some of the panelists, we would most certainly like to answer those questions. So start putting those questions in the chat. Thank you. So Claire, if I could turn to you initially, as you mentioned, DLA Piper has been involved in such a wide variety of climate-related initiatives. Can you tell us a little bit more about the range of jurisdictions and the practice areas represented in your firm's work globally?
Sure. Thanks, Gabby. Just to make it clear, I'm not a climate lawyer either. My background is commercial litigation before I joined the pro bono team, so I have an understanding of courts and how they work, but no scientific training like Marion. And I don't have a background in this. I've been on a steep learning curve since we started doing this work and really trying to educate myself. But hopefully I and the rest of our fantastic team at DLA are also doing this work. So hopefully we are all examples that, as I think Kelly said, if you make your mind up, you can learn enough to work out what your niche is and how you can actually contribute. So speaking of DLA and our pro bono team, as pro bono lawyers, our role is to source pro bono projects for all of our lawyers across the firm, whether that be the IPT team, whether that be one of our African offices. As you might have guessed from the wide range of initiatives that I discussed in answer to Gabby's first question, our climate work spans a really wide range of jurisdictions and practice areas. In terms of practice groups, I think we've needed to draw on the skills of pretty much all of our practice groups. We've had to involve disputes lawyers, finance and projects lawyers, intellectual property lawyers, tax lawyers, real estate lawyers. I feel like I'm forgetting a practice group, but I think we've had everybody drawn into this work because what we have tried to do is to try and tackle the problem from different angles and to really try and make sure there are opportunities to involve everybody. In terms of the jurisdictions, again, that's really wide. This is a global issue. Examples of some of the work that I talked about in the first part and what jurisdictions our lawyers working on those projects have come from. So for the establishment of the Ethiopian Tribunal, for example, that's been litigation and regulatory lawyers in the UK, in Europe, in Ethiopia, and in Kenya, as well as in France. The climate finance work has involved lawyers from South Africa, the UK, France, Brazil, Mauritius, among others. The UNFCCC negotiations projects involve a huge team of lawyers because what we're looking to do there is research points of law and provide timely answers to the negotiating team. So much like Ellie's climate hack, we have people working all around the world to answer questions as they come up. So that means that it's necessarily a huge geographic spread. It will go from the US to Australia via Europe. The sustainable project housing that I talked about involved lawyers from France, the UK, Dubai, and Abu Dhabi. The judicial review work has mostly to date involved lawyers in Europe. We do a lot of work in the South Pacific. That's really drawn on our lawyers in Asia Pac for time zone reasons. So Australia, New Zealand, Hong Kong, but also for some of the projects, Austria and the UK. And the legislative review work that we've done has involved a really broad spectrum of lawyers: Australia, Ethiopia, France, China, Poland, South Africa, Uganda, the UK. Our goal is really to involve all of our offices and all of our practice groups, ideally all of our lawyers, but I think that's a little way off now.
Terrific. Thank you so much, Claire. Fantastic. And I'm now going to switch to Ellie. Ellie, you started listing some of the some of the practice areas that are involved in the Chancery Lane project. Would you mind now going into the different practice areas involved in the project and the different types of lawyers involved?
Yeah, sure. I think it is as broad and as deep as there are lawyers, because we know that the climate crisis will touch every aspect. So I might go to a few examples with the themes that we've got. So not our existing work, because you can download those publications, you can see that, and how those clauses will make sense across all of the gamut of legal relationships and contracts. But to get you excited about the big hack, some of the themes that we've got already submitted. So essentially, let's think of a theme as a table where you sit there and you could get together and hack out this idea. So one of the themes is cities as an investable asset class, and Climate Kicker and facilitating this one. And if we're thinking about how we need to change cities from for all of the kind of all of the infrastructure and development that we need to cities become net zero cities, we're going to need a lot. So if you think which kind of lawyers will work on cities, so public procurement specialists, infrastructure, construction, anyone who's, what kind of IP could happen. So there's just a whole gamut of people that could join that table. Another one is content for climate. And so BAFTA, the UK, I don't actually, was it British film television? They hand out the BAFTAs with the awards. So they're looking at the role of television becoming norming sustainable behaviours and helping lawyers do that. So we're thinking media and IP trained lawyers that would be able to hack out some solutions to help with that really niche and exciting project there. Another one is the cooler plate. And so this is classic Matt. He's called it the cooler plate. So what would climate aligned boilerplate clauses look like? So when we're thinking about all of those clauses that are normally just put at the back of a contract, governing law, dispute resolution, all that you just don't think about, what would they look like if we actually which ones are hindering the transition and which ones can help enable the transition so that they would be aligned with the net zero, be able to make that resilient. So we all deal with that, the boilerplate commercial contracting, and we see it from a disputes perspective. If we're in litigation, we see it from a commercial contracting perspective. So if you think that you've got something to add, if you work with boilerplates, you could come and do that. So there's just a few ideas. Energy infrastructure, of course, all construction infrastructure lawyers can just do amazing work hacking out all of the contracting that they do with EPC agreements, making sure that EPCs and O&M agreements actually don't lock in this really hard fossil fuel-based economy, but create climate resilient infrastructure in all of the different points in that contracting and the long-term economic relationships with O&M contracts. Super exciting. Anyone can get involved. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Ellie. Such a wide variety of practice areas involved, even media professionals. So that's really inspirational. Thank you. Kelly, can I switch back to you? Do you have any further tips in particular for in-house counsel who want to be involved?
Yeah, sure. So I think I'd start just by echoing both Claire and Ellie there, which is around the importance of it could be all areas of law. And Claire in particular spoke there about all the different jurisdictions that DLA have supporting their efforts in the pro bono team. And it's very much a global effort. And I think I'd just like to take a moment to touch on, as a profession, we're typically sole contributors. If you're in private practice, perhaps you have your individual billable targets. And for me, I often work on like big corporate negotiations. And so I'm working on my customer opportunity, typically as a sole lead counsel and the only lead counsel on that opportunity. And so we're typically quite individual in our approach to lawyers, and in an industry that's typically been very competitive. And I think where we need to really pause and think about how we innovate together is this requires a global and a collaborative approach to resolve. And that's where I think there's such power in organizations such as the Chancery Lane Project. And if you see their list of all the different companies, both corporations, NGOs, or firms that have contributed, you have a number of different firms who perhaps ordinarily are competitors, but they've come together through the Chancery Lane project to really help on this way. And you'll see that in those handbooks, the clauses and the potential laws are really, really varied. So I'd really just echo those 2 points and encourage everyone to do that collaborative piece. Specifically for in-house counsel, now I've already touched on the fact that your primary area of expertise may not be environmental. You may not be a Mariam, or certainly have a Mariam in your phone book to help out on the scientific matters, but you will absolutely be providing legal advice, drafting, negotiation. Like for me, I sit in TMT area. Maybe you're a commercial lawyer, you might be experienced in data, etc., etc., etc. But the other thing that in-house lawyers really, one of their greatest strengths is the application to the business. And to achieve that application, you really need a lot of the soft skills. So you need to be able to translate that law to your business colleagues. You really need to be able to influence and advise and increase awareness to ensure that you're protecting your organization in the contracts, but also in your strategy and approach too. And I think that's really powerful here. In particular, if you think of the risk and compliance professional community and in-house lawyers as part of that wider team as well. If you think of horizon scanning, you can't afford not to be considering some of these things now, in the same way that data privacy is now across all areas of our organizations. The climate is absolutely the same, and that's why I'm nodding away here as the others are talking to say it's all areas that really need to be involved here. I would encourage the in-house counsel to rely on that diverse team and your network to support you in getting that traction. So if you're not an expert, I absolutely did bring in our panel firms for that informed stage, and you can do the same. But where you rely on the skills you do have, so those strengths about applying this and the implementation is really what's going to be key. And that's where we do need that diverse team, both globally, jurisdictions, areas of law, but also between private practice and in-house and other organisations too. Gabby, thank you.
Thank you very much, Kelly. And it really is fantastic to hear you say that consideration of sustainability and climate-related matters is the new norm, that it's just required now. And therefore, all lawyers, in fact, when we're considering the advice we provide to clients or internally as in-house counsel, have to always keep this in mind. Marion, if I could switch back to you. Thanks, Kelly. If I could switch back to you, Marion, and ask you a question around which particular practice areas within Hogan Lovells you're doing most of your work with in relation to climate work?
That's a good question. I mean, just to sort of echo what other people have said before, I think all areas need to consider climate change and sustainability in the advice that they give, whether it's looking at the methodology, from my perspective, methodology underlying your contract clauses, and whether that clause that you're putting in will be beneficial in the way that you hope it will be. Looking at climate change loss in the insurance sector. But I think a lot of my work at the moment is actually with products companies, a lot of tech companies, looking at the sustainability of their services, technical services, and their products. And the kind of example here is that if you are negotiating your way through the myriad EU regulations on the Green Deal and trying to work out whether you need to comply with certain aspects of those, it's important to sort of stand back and look at whether you, even if you technically don't meet the requirements for your device to shut off after 5 seconds, or whatever the appropriate thing is, in 10 years' time, when you look back, will your product be regarded as something that was inappropriate because you didn't take these steps to make it as environmentally friendly and as energy efficient as possible? And it's that kind of work which is very much at the fore of what we're doing at the moment, as well as the sort of additionality of projects which I've already mentioned.
Thanks very much, Marion. So very much around preventative measures as well. Just looking at the chat, there's a number of questions that have come in around conflicts of interest. So I think it would be fantastic to turn to that matter now. Ellie, could I start with you to answer this question around conflicts? Based on your experience at the Chancery Lane project and also Minter Ellison, what would you say around how to deal with conflicts of interest, particularly around perceived commercial conflicts of interest?
Gabby, I think you're spot on in identifying that it's generally a perceived commercial conflict rather than an actual legal conflict, but particularly with the kind of contentious climate work that so Özlem was sharing her work on her work in Turkey, and that's the kind of really crucial work that is being done that generally non-profits and people working in this space find it difficult to get pro bono assistance from the largest kind of commercial law firms because of perceived commercial conflicts. At the Chancery Lane project, because we're not contentious, we don't really have an issue with conflicts, and there's so much alignment between our law firms giving their time to draft these clauses because it helps their clients with their own net zero goals. So Kelly's talked about the kind of collaboration, not just with her law firms, but her law panel firms collaborating together. So we're seeing these opportunities to be solutions focused kind of rise above the commercial conflicts. So we're really lucky in this stage, but there is so much important work that needs to be done. The work that like Özlem is doing that does need pro bono assistance. And generally, in the chat, I saw someone mention around Chinese walls or information barriers. My understanding is that, and from working in a law firm, they're generally used for legal conflicts of interests. And so the perceived commercial conflicts, there's different kind of things to work around. And I think Claire might be able to help with some more nuanced view of how to kind of manage these.
Thanks, Ellie. Yeah, and I think that if it's a legal conflict, it's a legal conflict and there's nothing we can do. But if it's a perceived conflict or a commercial conflict, I think there's actually a big role for pro bono lawyers to play in this space around making sure that you identify the alignment between the client, your pro bono client, and your commercial client. A lot of companies actually are looking to move towards net zero. They're looking to reduce their emissions. They're looking to become more sustainable. So it can actually be really advantageous to be working on a project with an NGO that is moving in that direction. And it might be that a commercial client might join that project at some point. It's really good for the law firm to be involved and actually to be advising the NGO client in that space. I think there's also a role for pro bono lawyers to play around articulating the business case, I guess, for the transition and for increased sustainability across legal advice generally. If you look at the transition of energy practices, for example, from fossil fuel to renewables, there is much more work growing in the renewable space, and I think that there is less and less work in the extractive space, in the fossil fuel space. There's a case for us to make to the partners, to management, to whoever is saying that there is a commercial conflict here, saying that actually what we're doing by working on this project is building the skills we need to confront these future challenges. and to make the law firm itself sustainable in terms of the skills that we have to provide to our clients. Because if we have a client who is not quite there, they will probably be there in 5 to 10 years' time. It's important that we're able to help them along that journey, and that we're also able to demonstrate that we've got the skills, that we are involved in these sorts of matters. At DLA, we've had a real deepening of the work that we've been doing in relation to ESG, sustainability and ESG. And, you know, we've actually been asked as part of that to deepen the focus on climate in order to be able to give our lawyers opportunities to see the world slightly differently, to take a kind of sustainability lens across all of the work that they do. But Pro Bono also provides opportunities to do work that we might not get on a commercial basis, at least right now. Setting up the Ethiopian tribunal, for example, it'd be great if we were paid to do that, but those opportunities are fairly rare and few and far between, but they're really interesting work. Same with the climate finance work. You know, these are really innovative models, and they're really interesting ways of looking at the problem. And our lawyers love to do the work, but it potentially has applications in relation to commercial practices as well.
Thanks very much, Claire. It's fantastic to hear that involvement in climate-related pro bono work can also be so helpful in response in relation to work for commercial clients as well. Just before we move on to just one further question, I think that's probably all we're going to have time for. I just wanted to mention that at the Australian Pro Bono Centre, we have recently released a new guide, the Pro Bono Guide to the Climate Crisis, as I alluded to at the beginning of the session. And we do include a whole chapter on with some tips on how to deal with commercial conflicts of interest in particular. That chapter was written after we consulted with a range of different firms on that are involved in climate work on how they are managing these sorts of conflicts. So I really would encourage you to look at the guide and that chapter in particular. And I think my colleague Jessica Hatherall earlier in the session put the link to the guide into the chat. So definitely have a look at that as well. I'd like to bring in Özlem again. Özlem, in relation to challenges, other challenges to being involved in climate work, what have you experienced in Turkey? And I've noticed in the chat we have a question around how we encourage more climate-related work in the Middle East. And I'm wondering if you have a tip. Thank you.
Yes, I read that question, actually. I mean, when you are dealing with environmental cases in a country where there are a lot of human rights violations, climate cannot be the most important topic. If there is, you know, women killings or, I don't know, torture or freedom of speech problems, climate issues are always on the fourth or fifth priority for human rights defenders. And I really don't know. We are also having some issues, you know, there are women killings there, and you have been focusing on this pollution or, you know, mining things. People want to give priority to most, you know, problematic human rights issues. So I think it's a very good discussion point. But also, I'm just reading the questions about these conflicting interests. I mean, we are representing the NGOs, and we don't have so much collaboration with the big law firms or companies. And I said in my previous presentation that there is a kind of hostile environment. And I can continue from here, because when you open a case, the party is one part is the state plus company, the investor, and the other part is always citizen and the lawyer, us. So there were also some statements from officials that the lawyers dealing with these issues are being against the development of the country, and sometimes even accusation of treason. So it creates a huge conflicting environment with not only the companies and also with the with the administrative bodies, as I said. I will give an example here. There was a Bergama. Bergama is a town near Izmir, and maybe some of you hear it as Pergamon. It's an ancient city and very famous ancient city. There was a Bergama gold mine case in 2002. And in this case, there was an environmental struggle. There was an environmental case opened by lawyers, the mayor, and some citizens. And in this case, the lawyers, the city mayor, and also some citizens were accused of being spies, espionage of foreign foundations. And they were tried in state security courts. They were acquitted in 2003, but it was a breaking point for the lawyers and also the people involving in this type of cases. So we want to overcome all these conflicting issues and these problems, and we want to develop relations with international community, and we want to make pro bono work and also environmental work attractive in the country, because the climate issues are global and the solution will be also global, and it's not easy as an individual lawyer to deal with these cases. We want to introduce pro bono system to increase the number of lawyers specialized on the subject, and thanks so much for giving this opportunity. Maybe next year a corporate lawyer will be making the presentation on behalf of the Turkish lawyers, hopefully. And it should not be the only individual lawyers who have huge responsibility or workload on their shoulders. I can mention about some organizations of other things, but if we have time or questions. Thanks.
Thank you so much, Özlem. So we've just run out of time, unfortunately, so I think we're going to have to wrap this up. But I do understand that if anyone wants to continue a chat afterwards, it is possible to go into the orange room to have a breakout session in there. So thank you so much to all of our wonderful panelists. This has been such an inspiring and informative discussion today. Thank you so much to everybody who is listening in. I hope you found it as inspirational as I have. And for those who are listening in who are already involved in climate work or would like to be, please do let us know about this. Let PILnet know, let us at the Australian Pro Bono Centre know. We really want to hear from you. We want to keep track of how pro bono work on the climate crisis is evolving as well. And the more examples we can provide of legal professionals tackling climate change, then the more inspiration and guidance we can give to other professionals around the world to be involved. So please do keep us in the loop. So I'll leave it there. Thank you so much again. Thank you.
Thanks, everyone.